Torah study. We're about to delve into the beginning of civilization and time and see how it all relates to the Messiah and the world that we live in, and to God and what God wants to has in store for us from His treasures that are recorded in His Word. Let me start with prayer. Adonai Elohim, God of gods, I pray that your presence be in this room, that your light shine in our hearts and minds. As we humble ourselves before you to receive from your words edification, wisdom, knowledge, that we may be disciples emulating our Master and King, the Lord Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, and that we may walk according to your light, Lord. So teach us as we ponder the mysteries that have been recorded in your word for the ages, for the nations, throughout the generations, Lord. I pray this in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Good. Okay, so we talked about how Nimrod, who was the son of who? Noah had a son. No, Noah had 3 sons. You're supposed to say, no, Noah had 3 sons. Oh, and these 3 were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And then Ham, one of his sons was Nimrod, and he then built these cities that have all been discovered through archaeology. As we're kind of looking for like clues, right? So he built Babel, which is, what is in English, we don't call it Babel, we call it Babylon. Bab means gate. Eloni means the gods. Babyloni means the gateway to the gods. Babyloni. And so some say that was a portal. One of the portals to the fallen angelic realm. Try to know that this is one of the right? But it could just be the name of all the ziggurats, because those ziggurats were where the presences would descend and the high priests of these cities would exist, right? So regardless, he built Erech, that's where Iraq gets its name from. That's in the south of Iraq. And you can Google and see what's left of it. Babel is interesting because the gates of Ishtar, the gates of the Great Wall of Babylon, are in the museum in Berlin. And you can go see that yourself. You've seen it. And that's really incredible that those gates are there. I think they're preserved because they're part of this occult heritage. And it's interesting because ultimately they point to the truthfulness of the Word of God. Babylon was discovered by the German Orientalist Society in 1850. So it was an empirical proof that, hey, this biblical city was real, but it was founded by Nimrod. Ashur in the north. Nineveh, the great city of Nineveh, it says in Genesis chapter 10, the Torah, that Nimrod founded Nineveh. Nineveh is not just a city in the past, but, it's Mosul today is very close to Nineveh. Nineveh is still a place where people live. The Kurds live there. There's oil fields there. Nineveh. And, Jonah had to go there and preach, and he ran away and was swallowed by a whale. Ashurbanipal was the last great king of Nineveh, and he was defeated by the Babylonians. If I go to Google and I put Ashurbanipal, and I click on images, sure enough, I get a bust of Ashurbanipal. Several of them. I'd show it to you if I can turn this around. And he was from this town. What I'm trying to say, I guess, partly in this part of the discussion, is that one of the ways we can know whether this was true was to look at, for instance, the existence of these towns, where these cities that were created by Ham's grandson, Nimrod, or great-grandson, did they actually exist? Right? So Ham had Cush, and Cush had Nimrod, and Nimrod built these cities. Did these cities ever exist? Is there any empirical evidence left in the ground that says these cities existed? And every city that is mentioned in the Bible that Nimrod founded, we have discovered other than one. I forget if it's Resen or Calne. One of those two we haven't discovered. It means stables, and it's probably the horses, the royal stables. This other book that I had detailed accounts of kind of the depth of, what had been discovered there, as far as the magnificence of the palaces, the size, the technology, the knowledge was really incredible. Ashurbanipal, he had a library of 25,000 tablets. Those 25,000 tablets were carted away to London, where they were taken in the British Museum of Civilization, and George Smith, the curator, began to translate them from the Akkadian language that the Assyrians used to the English language that the British used in his time. All right? And it was called the Chaldean account of Genesis because it had so many stories in it that overlapped with the book of Genesis, including stories about the flood. I found a fragment of another copy of the Deluge, that's the flood, containing again the sending forth of the birds, and gradually collected several other portions of this tablet, fitting them in one after another until I had completed the greater part of the second column. Portions of a third copy next turned up, which when joined together completed a considerable part of the first and sixth columns. I now had the account of the Deluge, the flood, in the state in which I published it at the meeting of the Society of Biblical Archaeology on December 3rd, 1872. Now, have you guys ever heard this before? No. You see what I mean? Sometimes information is not given to us, and that's why we don't know that it exists. So anyhow, so let's move on. So that was kind of like looking at Nimrod and these cities, and I'm going to go in circles. I've realized that it's better to do this in circles. But let's move forward to some of the names that we find inside of Genesis chapter 10 and what nations came out of this. Why is this important to us? Well, for several different reasons. Let's look at Genesis chapter 11, Genesis chapter 12, and Acts 26. So in Genesis chapter 11, we have the story of the Tower of Babel, and at the end of this story, we have an act of judgment where God takes these nations. So in chapter 10, we have the 70 nations, 70 nations, that are descendant from the three sons of Noah who just came out of a great cataclysm. But they were civilized people, so they started to build mortar and brick structures, and that's what we see in the ancient Middle East, like the ziggurats. You can Google ziggurats, and you get to see these mortar and brick structures. And we have a list of these 70 nations, but then they get together, and the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. They all spoke the same language. Now, when you look at the library of Ashurbanipal, the 25,000 tablets that were found in Nineveh, in the library of Ashurbanipal, the last great king of Assyria, who was defeated in 612 BC by the Babylonians, and the fall of the Assyrian Empire and all of that is very much in the prophets talk about that. So when you look at those tablets, there's one tablet called Tablet 23, and it says on it that the God of the scribes has given me the knowledge to even read the writings from before the flood. That's called Tablet number 23. The God in the library of Ashurbanipal, there's one tablet that's been codified as Tablet number 23, and on it says, the God of the scribes, this angel, this fallen angel that is the teacher of the scribes. And we'll talk about that if you want to. Who are the scribes? How did they start? Where did they come from? Who are the first scribes? And all that stuff. When we talk about maybe the gods. So the scribes, he says that he was taught to read the writings on the tablets from the days before the flood. Now, these writing is distinctly different. This is the Sumerian writing. So in the very first civilization, in the south of Iraq, the land of Shinar, because it says right here, that it came to pass as they journeyed from the east, and they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. The land of Shinar was discovered by archaeologists in the 19th century. They call it the Sumerian civilization because the French archaeologists who pronounced it, instead of saying Shumer, said Sumer, and it's kind of stuck. That's the way he pronounced it. And the Hebrew is Shinar. So the Shumerian, Shinar, Sumerian civilization. This is, according to archaeology, the cradle of all civilization, the oldest of the civilizations. So it agrees with the biblical account. These are all different ways you can look at it, right? Because the Messiah died for these people. I know you think he died for you, but he died for these people. So unless you're the descendant of these people, then he didn't die for you. See what I'm saying? Because he's found inside of the pages of this story, right? But unless this story talks about the world that's outside of our window, and that includes you and me, then it doesn't apply to us. But it does apply to us. Why? Because we are the descendants of these people. Your mommy and daddy came out of a big boat. And then they walked, yeah. So it was traumatic. Are you guys afraid of water? No, I'm kidding. So do you ever find yourself claustrophobic when water comes all in the... Okay, so basically, these guys, they had a different writing, and all the writings, so we discovered all of these writings in these libraries, and they were written often in Akkadian, which was the language of Mesopotamia. But then we found these tablets that were distinctly different in their writing. We couldn't read them. They were the most ancient of all the languages, the Sumerian script. But thanks to the lexicon that Ashurbanipal created, the scribes of Ashurbanipal created for him, so that he could read the ancient writings. Through those lexicons, from Hebrew, we were able to read Akkadian, because Akkadian is the mother tongue of Hebrew. Abraham was from Ur of Chaldees, right? From the Chaldean account. So it says in the Bible that Abraham was from the Ur of Chaldees, right? And the Chaldeans were a family. They're a very important family inside of the South Mesopotamia. And this is the Ur of the Chaldeans, all right? Remember, because humanity goes back to clans and to families, right? So, for instance, right now, let's say if I do this, I go, and let's say, you know, I'm going to actually do something fun, and I'm going to pick on Joyce a little bit, because she's all cozy under a blanket, and I can pick on her. So, you know, Joyce is from the south, but people from the north, they call themselves the Han. You know, in China, the north, the people in the north, the Han Chinese. It says that in Wikipedia, it says that the Han is an ethnic group from China. Okay, an ethnic group from China. The Han family. There was like Mr. Han, the Han family. 92% of the Chinese population and more than 97% of the Taiwanese population are Han. It says in Wikipedia. Wow. Out of the entire human population in the world, 19% are Han Chinese.
Sorry, 92% of Chinese and Vietnamese?
90% of the people of mainland China and 97% of Taiwan. And this write-up doesn't get into Vietnam, maybe it does later, but most of the people of Vietnam, well over 70% are Han. And you can see it, right? You can look at the Vietnamese, they look Chinese, right? So the 19% of the people of the world come from a family, the Han. And you can go to China and you can go to see the great tomb of the Yellow Emperor. It's like a place of pilgrimage, right? The Han Emperor, the original one, the oldest one. Some people say it's a mythological character. Why did he live so long? Because these guys had great long lives. Well, when you read in the Torah, even after the flood, even though God regulated still life to 120, yet these guys, Ham, Shem, Japhet, and their children, for quite some time, lived very long lives, even after the flood, right? And they have they have time to walk around and start like civilization centers, and they have huge knowledge, and we'll talk about knowledge, where they get this knowledge from. So these guys, they come and they settled in the land of Shinar. And in the libraries of Ashurbanipal, for instance, we find this older language. So when it says that, and the whole earth was of one language and of one speech, it may be this more ancient language that is the Sumerian language that is distinct from all the other languages, unrelated to any language we know. And it exists only in the south of Mesopotamia, in the cradle of civilization, in the oldest of places. And we were only able to read it because of the lexicons of King Ashurbanipal. He had the Akkadian Sumerian lexicons. Why could we read Akkadian? Because Akkadian is the mother tongue of Hebrew. Like Latin is the mother tongue of French, Spanish, and Italian. Hebrew has the same relationship to Akkadian as, let's say, French or Italian have to. Linguistically, what is it that has made French into French from Latin? May not be exactly the same linguistic process that made Hebrew from Akkadian, but regardless, because Abraham was from this part of the world where after the kingdom of Akkad in the south took over, Akkad is one of the cities of the south of Iraq, then Akkadian became the language. And then what happened is that, Abraham brought that language with him and he talked to his wife and children in that language, and they talked to each other, and it was a dialect of Akkadian. They were a family from back home here in Chaldeans, right? And as far as like who are these guys, who are the Chaldeans, how do they relate to these tribes and all that stuff, for their genealogies, you can read about that in the book of Jasher, which is a book mentioned in the Torah but not part of the canon. That gives us detailed account of the multitude of families that came from this line that established clans and farmlands and ranches and temples and all that stuff in the part of the world where Abraham was from. And you can see how Abraham married into them and who he was named after and all kinds of background information that hasn't made it in the official canon, but would have been studied by, of course, Jewish scholars and teachers always as books of great wisdom and places of information, right? So the reality of all of this, when archaeology goes and the Ur of Chaldees is discovered Abraham was from, by Sir Arthur Woolley. And so these guys spoke one language, and then they decided to build this tower, and that's a bit of a mystery to me as to what this tower was to heaven. They were going to build a tower to heaven. Was it a ziggurat, one of these step pyramids? And are they going to build it all the way to heaven? Was it something more advanced? That's something that actually, like one of these chariots, like the one that Elijah went into, that took you all the way to heaven. It doesn't say they're going to build a chariot. It says they're going to build a tower. So, I know, it says that they laid brick for stone and slime for mortar. And the slime they took from the ground, naphtha. Right? That's how you say oil in Arabic and Persian to this day, naft. Yeah, exactly, bitumen. And the bitumen trade was huge all the way into the Roman Empire from Mesopotamia. The Romans bought bitumen from Mesopotamia. It was a big, big business, like the oil business is today, right? So, therefore, the name of the Lord scattered them abroad. So it says that they had pride. The peoples wanted to have all one language. They begin to do. Okay, let me backtrack. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. All right? Remember, these people have been bitten by the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. And their heart has, even though there's been a purification, the flood, water is always purified. There's been a purification in the blood. All kinds of bloodlines were removed from the planet, yet things have survived, even in the line of Seth. Even these guys, they quickly become quite evil, even though they're the children of Seth, the righteous one. And the Lord came down. Let us go down. It's the plural, the counsel of God. Let us go down and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. The origin of the languages. My dad used to say, everywhere he's traveled to, he's discovered that life is the same. The only thing that's different is the languages. And he wasn't talking biblically or anything like that, or even philosophically. It was just experience. Yeah, he just like noticed that once he gets to know people in various cultures, they have the same problems, the same jealousies, the same passions, the same wars, the same likes, the same. It's just a language that's a little bit different, needs and wants, and all that stuff. So this is where it all got. The languages were separated, and that created a disparity in unity, right? I'll show you in the next this session and next session where the Yaphatites settled, and you'll see that the Yaphatites settled exactly where there's a branch of language, a very important branch of language. It's called the Indo-European branch. Does anyone know about that? Okay, so there are languages that go back to Greek, Latin, and Sanskrit. Sanskrit in India. So if languages that go back to Greek, Latin, and Sanskrit are called the Indo-European language branch. So you got the Germanic languages. You've got, Indian, Hindi. You have Persian. You have the Latin languages, the Greek languages, the French, Italian, Spanish, the Indo-European languages. But actually, when you see where the Yaphatite tribes settled, the children of Yaphet settled, it matches perfectly where the Indo-European languages. You go, okay, that's interesting. It goes from India to Persia, and then Greece and Rome, but why not the rest of the Middle East? Why not, the heartland of the Middle East? Well, because once you see where everyone settled, you realize that's where Shem settled. And that's why their language that came from there is called Semitic, like Arabic or Hebrew, Semitic languages, because they go back to Shem. That's what anti-Semitic means, right? Anti-Shem, right? So this shouldn't be called the Indo-European language. It should be called the Yaphatite. Right? You kind of go back to the biblical view of reestablishing reality and building it back from there. So when you get to the New Testament and you get to the book of Revelation and you have all of these judgments and such as the apocalypse and all that stuff, you understand who it is against and what's going on, because you've now built the building blocks of reality from a biblical point of view, from the foundation up. This is kind of the long-term view. So here it says that God came and he scattered them abroad upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build a city. So here God scattered them and cast them out. There is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. And it's interesting because if you kind of go and read, let's say Deuteronomy 32, verse 8 and 9, I like to use the ESV for that verse because it has the accurate translation, the English Standard Version. So Deuteronomy 32, verse 8 and 9. It says, when the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind. In Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 8, it's referring back to this, right? When mankind was divided and their inheritance was given. He fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. So God fixed the borders of the various families and clans. And you'll see countries push as far, and then they for some reason can't push. Like the Great Persian Empire was defeated by a group of Spartans. And they could never push into the Greek territory and take it over. And then the Greeks rose. And it's like, why? It was like this invisible wall. Like, why could they not just take over there? Well, because apparently God has fixed the borders of the people according to the number of the sons of God. So when people are cast out from his presence at Tower of Babel, they are given into the realm of the angels that had also been cast out in the Garden of Eden. The cast out ones are together, the sons of God. And this is why Satan can say to Yeshua, to Jesus, in his temptations, I have dominion. Dominion has been given to me over all the kingdoms of the earth. Because these tribes and these clans, they will grow to become kingdoms and empires when they grow up. And Satan says, I have been given dominion over all of these kingdoms, and I will give them to you if you worship me. Right? And so here is where we see that the origins of the reality that Satan's pointing to in this verse. In the next verse it says, but the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, his allotted heritage. So God then chooses one clan The clan of Jacob. Now, who is Jacob? What's another name for Jacob? Israel. Who is Jacob's dad? Okay. Who was Isaac's dad? And Abraham, which line is he from? Shem, Ham, or Japheth? Shem. That's why they're called the Semitics. Right? So from Shem comes Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and God chooses one of the clans from the line of Shem as his own. And he puts the boundaries of that land, the same way that he put boundaries for the other nations, and those boundaries are described in Genesis chapter 15, the boundaries of the land of Jacob. And then God then begins a work in that, through them and in that land. But this is interesting because in chapter 12, we have the story of Abraham. And the story of Abraham is the story of a Mesopotamian guy. Let's actually read it from chapter 11, verse 10, just to give you that background a little bit. These are the generations of Shem, the oldest son of Noah. Shem was 100 years old. He was 100 years old when he gave birth, when he begat Arpachshad. 2 years after the flood. 2 years after the flood.
He was 100?
Yes, because these guys lived long times after the flood. They still have the old
They were little boys.
chronos.
No.
No, they're old people. I mean, old for us, but young for them. You know, because when you live 800 years, when you're 100, it's only 1/8 of your life. So if you live 100 years now, what's 1/8 of 100? Quickly, guys, 10. So, you know, 12-ish. So you know, he was young, a young old man. And Shem lived after he begat Arpachshad 500 years. So he lived until he was 600, because he was 100 when he gave birth, and he lived 500 years after that. You know, his wife gave birth, but you know, and it's the old, you know, they were already messing up things back then. And what, you're pregnant? That's not natural. No, don't say what's natural, what's not natural. And Shem lived after he begat Arpachshad 500 years and begat sons and daughters. And Arpachshad lived 530 years and begat Salah. And Arpachshad lived after he begat Salah 403 years and begat sons of daughters. And of course, you read in the ancient Indian writings, like the Mahabharata, about these, you know, old people, and in the Chinese writings, the immortals, and they had great understanding of health and great understanding of medicine. You know, like you read like the Yellow Emperor's Guide to Chinese medicine, to internal medicine, and it's really profound. And you think, like, where did these guys get this information from? It's like so advanced, right? And so deep, right? And it's like, so these guys, you know, were practicing health. They wanted to, you know, they came from the world before the flood. They were connected to God and the angels. They were from that high birth, and they had deep knowledge about God's creation, right? And Salah lived 30 years and begat Eber. Eber, there's a town in Mesopotamia called Nippur. B and P are the same consonant. And so some people say Nippur, Nibur, that's where the Eberis settled. And that's originally where the Hebrews get their name from. That's one theory. They're from Eber, and that's why they're called the Hebrews. And Salah lived 30 years and begat Eber. And Salah lived after he begat Eber 430 years and begat sons and daughters. And Eber lived 430 years and begat Peleg. And these guys were having, you know, children like 430 years because they wanted to have like a child-free life for a long time so they could explore and not be bogged down. No, I'm kidding. And then they're like, okay, it's time to have kids now. Okay, no, that's not true. I don't know why they waited that long. And Eber lived 430 years and begat Peleg. And Eber lived after he had begot Peleg 430 years and begat sons and daughters. And Peleg lived 30 years and begat Reu. And Peleg lived after he begat Reu 209 years and begat sons of daughters. And they traveled around, they lived in different places, they moved around, they were populating the earth, right? Remember, what did God say? What was God's first commandment ever? Even before the Garden of Eden thing, don't eat from this tree. Even this is in the Torah, when you kind of go, okay, oh, there's a commandment. It's the first one. There it is. Yeah. Go be fruitful, multiply, and rule the earth.
Yeah.
Be fruitful and multiply. Right? With those words, like when God said, be fruitful and multiply, those words that came out of his mouth, the vibrations it produced, that's, I think, why the sexual energy is so strong. And everyone's like, ah! Because God said, be fruitful and multiply. And it kind of turned that energy on. And we're like, we all became. So that's where it comes from, the first of the commandments. And Peleg lived after he begat Reu 209 years and begat sons and daughters. And Reu lived 32 years and begat Serug. And Reu lived after he begat Serug 207 years and begat sons and daughters. And Serug lived 30 years and begat Nahor. And Serug lived after he begat Nahor 200 years and begat sons and daughters. And Nahor lived 29 years and begat Terah. So this guy was only 29. Right? So you can see the life expectancy is slowly coming down. God said after the flood that the life expectancy would be limited to 120. But you see, it kind of took a little bit of time for the organic process to absorb God's command. I know we always think of God working like through the miracles of the Messiah, like he just turns water into wine and raises the dead and heals the sick. And we're always looking to God to do this. Each time someone says God works through process, we get all like allergic to it. But in the Bible, God works through process all the time. In fact, the miracles of the Messiah are unique. They don't work through process to show that there's something unique about this guy and his powers. He can break the process. He can make things instantaneous. But God is working through process. He doesn't just say to Adam, okay, Adam, it's all good now. He begins an entire process that leads to these nations, that leads to Israel, that leads to the Messiah. Then the Holy Spirit comes and awakens the nations to who the Messiah is. Then the Lord returns and he gives a new body. Then he establishes the kingdom. It's like, okay. It's like a process, right? And of course, we have short lives, so that it seems very long to us, right? But if we had longer lives, it would seem very short to us. You see what I'm saying? Okay. And Nahor lived 920 years and begat Terah. And Nahor lived after he begat Terah 190 years and begat sons and daughters. And Terah lived 70 years and begat Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. So Terah was the father of Abraham. It says that in verse 26 of chapter 11. Terah. And I forget who Abraham was named from, and it says in the book of Jasher that someone in their family died young, and Abraham was named after that guy. Like he was like the new, was in the memory of that guy who died young. So these guys they had lives like we have lives, right? Because sometimes when you read in the Bible, it seems like so distant, like, oh, Abraham, yes. But these guys had lives, like they wiped their noses, they bumped into each other, like they had lives, you know what I mean? They had emotional stuff they dealt with and traumas and joys, and they ate food and they cooked stuff. And have you tried this spice? This is curry. It's from, cousin Yaphet's kids. They've sent us this thing. It's called curry. Okay. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abraham, Nahor, and Haran begat Lot. So you remember Abraham and Lot? They leave Mesopotamia together. So Terah begat Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran, Abraham's brother, had a son. His name was Lot. So to Lot, Abraham was who? Uncle Abraham, right? Uncle Abraham. Uncle Abe. So memorize it that way. To Lot, there was Uncle Abe. So Uncle Abe and Lot leave Mesopotamia together. Why? Well, we'll get to it in a second. Abraham and Nahor took them. Okay, so and Haran died after his father Terah in the land of his nativity. Where? In the Ur of the Chaldees. Ur of the Chaldees. That's where we meet them. So if I go to my trusty, is Google real or is it just like images in a data bank? And I go Ur of Chaldees, and I go, whoa, Ur of Chaldees, take me there. Google. In the future, it'll be like glasses, you wear. You just explore. So I see all these images. Of course, I've already shown you the great ziggurat of Ur. the great ziggurat of Ur, right, where the moon god was celebrated. There are more temples found to the moon god than to any other deity in the Middle East. Map-wise, oh, you probably can't see this. It's kind of in the south of Iraq, where the bottom of this red line is. And here you have these American soldiers going up the ziggurat of Ur. So empires within empires. So Ur was a real place. This place here, where these guys, sorry? U-R. They like to keep it simple back then. U-R-G, no, just U-R. We don't have time here. It's got to put it right on clay, got to put it in the oven. It's not like, so Ur are the Chaldeans. The Chaldean family is a very important family. But Sarah, and Abraham and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abraham's wife was Sarah, and Sarah was Abraham's half-sister. And the name of Nahor's wife, Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. And Sarah was barren. She had no child, just in case we don't understand what barren is now. It says she was barren, had no child. And Terah took Abraham his son. I guess it's a precision. And Terah took Abraham his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarah, his daughter-in-law, his son Abraham's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan, and they came into Haran and dwelt there. So the land of Canaan, you go, okay, where's Canaan? Well, that's the land that eventually will be called Israel, right? But if you kind of go and look at the Canaanites, you realize that the Canaanites were the sons of Ham. So from the point of view of these guys, when they're referencing these locations, they know who they are. Noah is still alive when Abraham is living. They overlap in life. These guys know who they are. They're referring to their extended family. Everyone knows who everybody is. Okay? They're not as distant from this knowledge as we are from it, right? So the God calls Abraham. Now the Lord said unto Abraham, get you out of your country and from your kindred and from your father's house unto a land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless you, and curse them that curse you, and in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. So suddenly in verse 3 in chapter 12 and verse 8 in chapter 11 find themselves in direct contrast. Look what it says in chapter 11 verse 8. So the Lord scattered them, all of this one family, that was the nations, scattered them abroad and upon the face of the earth, and they left off to build a city. So they confounded God, confounded their languages in verse 7, so they wouldn't understand each other, and scattered them. That's kind of the reverse of blessing. But in chapter 12, verse 3, we hear that all the families of the earth will be blessed in Abraham, right? And Paul later will talk about how God spoke about the seed in singular, that God would bless the world in the seed of Abraham. And Paul will make a big deal as a rabbi, and he'll say, you know, guys, it's interesting. It said seed, not seeds. That must have been talking about the Messiah. Now, if we kind of fast forward to Acts chapter 26, we read the story of this guy who is from the tribe of Benjamin. Benjamin was whose son? Jacob's. Jacob had how many sons? 12. And how many wives? 4 wives, 12 sons, and Benjamin was the youngest. And that's easy to remember because it's a bit of an expression. Someone might say, so-and-so is the Benjamin. You know when Joseph, you know, you've all seen the, what's that guy? He did the Technicolor Code. Andrew Lloyd Webber. Has everyone here seen Andrew Lloyd Webber's Technicolor, Joseph and the Technicolor Code? Okay. It's a pretty, it's a good musical. So Joseph, when he goes away, and Jacob is heartbroken, he gets a younger boy, and to some ways to replace in his old age Joseph, who was the son of his old age, and that's Benjamin, right? There's that, So Jacob marries two sisters, right? Who are they? Leah and Rachel. Which one is older? Leah. But which one did he really want to marry? Rachel. But in the Middle East this day, you don't allow the younger daughter to marry before the older one, because then people will say there was something wrong with the older one. Why was she not married first? And no one will ever marry her. No one will explore to find out what was wrong. People will just assume there was something wrong.
She had a choice. She wanted a choice.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So when he went and said, I want to marry the younger daughter, the father was like Laban, was, no, you're going to first marry the older one. And so he tricked her. He tricked Jacob. That was a very big trick. So it says that it's only in the morning that he realized, after his first night, and he consummated the marriage, that he realized in the morning that he was with the wrong girl.
How can you not do that morning? Is that morning?
It's dark in the tent, no lights. They look the same, the kinds of girls.
Voice is different.
Didn't talk.
He slapped you when you called her Rachel.
It was one of those mistakes. And then so he said, I want to marry Rachel. I'm sorry. He said, okay, you can marry her, but I'll give her to you now, but you have to work for 7 more years for me, for free, to get the second girl. And he said, fine. Then when they went, Rachel would just not get pregnant. All right, so he had children with Leah and 2 concubines, but then Rachel got pregnant and she had Joseph, and that was a dear child to Jacob. But then Joseph was taken away by his brothers because they were jealous of him and sold into slavery. So then he had Benjamin with her, all right, the other child. And so Paul, no, I don't know. It doesn't say that in the Bible, but there might be other writings. So Paul, in Romans chapter 11, says that I am from the tribe of Benjamin, right? So Paul was from the tribe of Benjamin. He was a Benjaminite. Benjamin, right? He was from, it says that in Paul chapter 11. No, sorry, chapter 9. Why am I saying chapter 11? I say the truth in Messiah, I lie not, my conscience also bears me witness in the Holy Spirit, that I have great heaviness and continual sorrow in my heart, for I could wish that myself were accursed from the Messiah, for my brethren, my kinsmen, according to the flesh, who are Israelites, to whom pertains the adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the Torah and the service of God and the promises. Wait, or is it in chapter 10? It's somewhere around here. I just read it like just this morning, pretty much. I was getting ready to share with a friend of mine about these 3 chapters where Paul talks about. Does anyone see it? So okay, you keep looking for it. Just put in Paul from the tribe of Benjamin. 11?
Wait. No. Philippians 3.
Well, no, it's in Romans for sure. I mean, it might be in Philippians too. But I just read it like.
Okay, it's in Philippians 3:5, and according to this, it's 11:1.
11:1? Yeah, it's right here. That was right, 11. It says, I say then, has God cast away his people? God forbid. For I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. Right? Paul is from the tribe of Benjamin, right? Benjamin, the youngest son of Jacob, right? So the Messiah, Yeshua, Jesus, which of these 12 tribes is he from? So he's the son of who? Yes, that's right, Judah. So let's build it up. Let's build it backwards. He's the son, Jesus is the son of Mary and Joseph, but the son of God. But often, yes, the line of David, he's often called Ben David Ben Elohim, the son of David, the son of God, right? So if you look at the Gospel of Luke, you will find that the Gospel of Luke begins with the genealogy of Mary, and it follows us back 14 generations to King David, right? Mary is the son of David through Nathan, not Solomon, but Solomon's younger brother. And Joseph's line is found in which gospel? Which gospel begins with the line of Joseph? Matthew. The Gospel of Matthew begins with the line of Joseph. And Joseph is the son of David through Solomon. Yeah. A long time ago, right? But they both go back, and it's interesting because there was a curse put on the line of Solomon, and it's important that God, Satan must have been happy that day, but then God used Nathan. So the Messiah was still the son of David. So David, 14 generations to David, and from David to Abraham, it's according to the New Testament, it's 14 generations. Right? And then from Abraham to Adam, and Adam the son of God. So if you go to the Gospel of Luke, there's the line of Mary, and we read that it explains it to us. So David is the one who is the ancestor of the Messiah, and that's very important. Why?
Who's the what?
Ancestor of the Messiah.
Oh, ancestor.
Because there are many prophecies in the Tanakh that say that the Messiah had to be the son of David. You know about those? Do you know about that or not? No, just tell me if you don't, because I'll show them to you. The Messiah has to be the son of David? You know that? No, okay. So the Messiah has to be the son of David. Probably the most famous one that everyone usually knows is Isaiah chapter 9, but there are many other prophecies. Isaiah chapter 9, it says, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Where do you recognize this from? Think. Yes. Or maybe a Hallmark Christmas card? Yes. This is a Hallmark fame. Right? Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. So this was penned by the prophet Isaiah 700 years before the Messiah. And his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. But the next verse, of the increase of his government and peace, there shall be no end upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment, with justice, from henceforth even forever, the zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. So he shall inherit the throne of David, because it says right here, upon the throne of David, right? And if you look at kind of in chapter 11 of Isaiah, and there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. Right? So who was Jesse?
David's grandfather.
Dad.
Oh, David's dad. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Who was David's grandfather? Boaz. And who was the great love of Boaz's life? And Ruth gets her own book in the Bible, the book of Ruth. Right? So Jesse, who is the father of David, Isaiah prophesies about this family, this clan. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. How do you say branch in Hebrew? Yes? Netzer. And that's why the town was called Netzeret. Because these guys, once Isaiah spoke this prophecy about the family of Jesse, that out of them would come a Netzer, they formed a clan they realized that from them the Messiah would come. Well, yes, that the concept of Nazarene is a slightly different concept. Someone who fasts and is dedicated completely to God, or doesn't cut his hair, no razor, like is completely living dedicated to God. Shamshon kind of reminds me of that a little bit. But in this case, the Netzer was just a term, a metaphor, a symbolic language used by God to talk about the Messiah. And because it was pointed that it was from the family of Jesse, the family of Jesse formed a mini group inside of it called the Netzerites, who believed that from them the Messiah would come, because it said, the prophet said it. And when they went into Babylon in exile, they remained as a whole. When they came back, they were given a piece of land in north around the Galilee, where they formed a town called Netzeret. And recently, when we discovered in writings from the temple the name of the Levitical, person in charge of representing the Jewish priesthood in that land, in that city, we saw that the spelling was actually Netzer. So the town was never called Nazareth. It was called Netzeret. And it's different because when you say Nazareth, you don't see the connection. But when you say Netzeret, you immediately see the connection. And so the Netzerites, they went and lived there. So that's why when he said that, he has come to their own, he got up and he said, you guys were right. One of you guys are the Netzerites, and one of you is the Messiah, and it's me. It's in the synagogue of Nazareth, that whole passage, that story. And then they wanted to reject him and stone him. Why? Because he was going all the way to Capernaum and empowering these like nobody fishermen instead of the other Netzerites. Sorry?
Capernaum?
Yes, Capernaum. And so it's a potato thing. You say potato, I say potato. So basically there was kind of this context. So Jesse is the father of David, and David is the ancestor of the Messiah, and it's his throne that the Messiah is going to inherit. And that's what Gabriel says to Mary, right? Gabriel comes to Mary, and what does Gabriel say to Miriam? Miriam herself, the daughter of David. She says, to a virgin espoused to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David. And the virgin's name was Miriam. So both Miriam and Yosef were the sons of David. One through Shlomo, the other through Nathan. The two sons that David had with who? No. Bathsheba. That's right, very good. Bathsheba. And Bathsheba was his 11th wife. And the angel came in unto her. Yeah.
Wait, don't even go there.
He was a king of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Miriam. And the angel came in unto her and said, Shalom, Miriam. Shalom, our highly favored. The Lord is with you. He certainly didn't say to her, Hail Mary, because that was like Roman language. These guys were like Jews, and so he said, Shalom, Miriam, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women. And when she saw him, she was troubled at his saying, and cast in her mind what manner of salutation this would be. And the angel said unto her, Fear not, Miriam, for you have found favor with God. Behold, you will conceive in your womb, and you will bring a son, and you shall call him Yeshua, which means God saves. He shall be great, and shall be called the Son of the Highest, the Son of El Elyon. And the Lord God, Adonai Elohim, shall give unto him the throne of his father David. Gabriel says to Miriam, he'll get the throne of David, and he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of the kingdom there shall be no end. So Yeshua, or Jesus, is the son of David, and he receives his throne. Now David, from the 12 sons of Jacob, the 12 clans, we said that Paul was from the clan of Benjamin. But which clan was David's family from? Which of the original, the 12, was David's family from? Where did David live? Judea. They were from the tribe of Jude, the fourth son, right? of Jacob. So Jesus was the son of Jude. Hey, Jude. Find a way of remembering it, right? So
Jesus was the son of Jude.
it was in a few many generations down, but because from the Jacob had 12 sons, Paul was from Benjamin, many generations down, and Jude from Jude came the family of Jesse, of which David was a member. David marries Bathsheba, and he has Nathan, and Nathan gives birth to Mary, and Mary bears Jesus. And so the legal line goes through Joseph. So because Joseph was the son of Solomon, and Jesus can inherit. He's inheriting through Solomon and through Mary, because a woman can inherit, according to the incident of the daughters of Zelphod, which are in the book of Numbers, which established the inheritance to the woman, which now we realize was put there for Jesus to inherit through Mary as well. So the whole thing was pointing to him. Anyways, but if you go to Genesis chapter 49, you get some very interesting clues, because Jacob is kind of like dying. And as he's dying, he says prophetically something over each one of his 12 sons. And of course, these things reverberate throughout the ages. These are prophetic words spoken through very important patriarchs. Reuben, you're my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power. Like the seed of his youth, the chi of his youth, is going into Reuben. Unstable as water. Thou shalt not excel, because thou wentest up to thy father's bed, and then defiled thou it. He went up to my couch. So he slept with one of his father's concubines. He didn't sleep with his own mother, but he slept with one of his, father's concubines, and that kind of disqualified him. Genesis chapter 49, verse 4. Simon and Levi, the two next sons. Reuben, then Simon and Levi, right? The Levi from God chooses later on the tribe of Levi, and says that the firstborn of Levi will have to serve him in the priesthood. And that's where we get the Levi genes from? No. Can someone plug this in? I have 7% left. So Simon and Levi are brethren, instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. O my soul, come not thou unto their secret, unto their assembly. Mine honor be not thou united, for in their anger they slew a man, and their self-will they digged down a wall. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So Joseph is prophesying over his sons. What happened to these guys? What is this anger that he's talking about? What did Simon and Levi do that really was very vengeful and angry? Does anyone remember? Their sister was raped. Their sister was raped, and they wanted honor and restitution. They wanted the honor of their family to be reestablished, and they declared war on this family, and they went to defend her. And then this family said, no problem, we will marry her. We'll make it right. The guy who raped him, her, will marry her. Oh. I know, it sounds strange. And so it was more like not love, was not really like the thing. Like you didn't fall in love, right? It was more like, you weren't looking for Prince Charming. It was a true love's kiss, that kind of thing. It was more like, this is what people do. They get married, they love each other, they raise children, they support each other, they live right, etc. Right? And see what hand of life gives you. It was like, and then you learn to love each other over time, because you don't really know each other beforehand. You don't have like this prolonged, cohabitation. You don't. What's that? Shagging? There's no shagging together. Period. Right? So basically, they say we'll make it right. We'll marry her, and then they say, well, we can't do that. We're the covenanted people. We're chosen by God. You can't just marry into us. It's against our ways. What? Yes, you all have to get circumcised first. And that's painful. Like, you have sharp stones. These are not boys are circumcised on the 8th day. This is not the 8th day. These guys are adults, right? There's not a lot of anesthetic. I don't know what they use, but there's no hospital. There's no. So they say, fine, we'll do it. We will do it. We'll make it. We'll go that far. We'll make it right. We're sorry. We will all get circumcised, become a part of you guys, and then we will marry her and make it all right. And they got circumcised. And while they were wounded, sitting there and couldn't move, Simon and Levi went and killed all of them. And so that's what Jacob's referring to when he says to them, cursed be their anger. Right? Their anger leads to murder, to hate. Right? And so anger is it's like Jesus said, Yeshua said, if you have, is this thou shalt not murder, but have you really felt anger in your heart to the point where you wanted someone dead? Well, from God's point of view, you have sinned already. Right? The intention was formed in the intention chamber of your mind and heart. Yeah, and God saw it. Well, manslaughter is an accident. It's when like I take my axe and I go like this, and then the top of it flips over and comes and hits you, right? But the point is that's what he's referring to. Then you have verse 8, the 4th son. So the Judah, you are he whom your brethren shall praise. Your hand shall be in the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you are gone up. He stooped down and he couched as a lion, as an old lion. Who shall arouse him up? And here, verse 10, the most important, the heart of it. The scepter of rulership, shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet. So now we know as early as the time where Jacob and his sons, his immediate children, were alive on his deathbed, he prophesies that the scepter of rule will come from the 4th son, Judah. Not from Reuben, who slept with his dad's concubine, not from Simon and Levi, who carried out this murderous rage, but from the 4th son, Judah. He will be awarded, his bloodline will be awarded the scepter of rulership. And the Messiah is from Judah. Until Shiloh, which is a term for the Messiah, come, that the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh come. And when the Romans removed from Israel the right to carry out the death penalty, the Jews killed by stoning, Romans by crucifixion, that if someone in this Roman colony had to be put to death, the imperial courts of Rome would have to decide that. Why? Because Rome was a civilized place, and you couldn't just go around killing people. Rome would have to decide whether you should be killed or not. That was the idea. Civilization would come to Judea, right? And so here, a lot of these guys put on sackcloth and walked around the temple weeping because they felt scripture had been broken, that the scepter had departed from Judah's hands. The Romans had taken it. The Shiloh had not arrived. The Messiah had not arrived. But they didn't know that in Bethlehem, he had already been born at that time. So this is kind of, but anyways, trivia. Come unto him shall it get. So this is the story. So the Messiah. So if we go to Acts chapter 26 now. Acts chapter 26. Yes, Acts chapter 26, we see a conversation between this particular son of Judah, the Messiah. He was a son of Judah, right? Everyone on board of that? And because David was the son of Judah, Judah was the son of Jacob, Jacob the son of Abraham, Abraham the son of Shem, Shem the son of Noah, Noah was the 8th from Adam, right? Adam was made in the image of God. He was the son of God. right? This is the story of these important people. They go back to God. They're made in the image of God, and they have these bloodlines that are filling the earth. And I'm going to show you the families that came from Genesis chapter 10, the empires. Who were the Persians? Who were the Medes? Who were the Greeks? Who were the Romans? Which sons, who were the Egyptians? What mighty empires, which sons created? Which bloodlines? Now we're focusing on the bloodline of Jacob, but now I'll show you the other bloodlines so you understand the world and how it took shape and who these empires were and how they relate to Genesis chapter 10. Why is that important? Well, in Acts 26, there's a conversation happening reported by the son of Benjamin. So Paul, we said, was a son of Benjamin according to his own testimony. And we know the Messiah was a son of Judah. So it says here that Paul is testifying to King Agrippa about his conversion. Or I don't like to use the word conversion because he was Jewish and he recognized the Jewish Messiah. So that's what it usually says, the conversion of Paul. But Paul wasn't converting to anything. He was just awakening to who the Messiah was. God had come to the line of David to fulfill the Torah and the Nevi'im. And this is what Paul was awakened to. It was the rest of the world that was going to convert to this branch of Judaism. So here, Paul is telling this story, and he says that, as he's going away to Damascus, to the synagogues of Damascus, to arrest all those who had converted. Wherefore, as I went to Damascus with authority and commission from the chief priests at midday, O king, I saw in the way a light from heaven, above the brightness of the sun, shining round about me, and them which journeyed with me. And when we were all fallen to the earth, I heard a voice speaking unto me and saying in the Hebrew language, Saul, Saul, why persecute you me? It is hard for you to kick against the pricks. And I said, Who are you, Lord? He said, I am Yeshua, whom you persecute. But rise and stand upon your feet, for I have appeared unto you for this purpose, to make you a minister and a witness of both of these things which you have seen, and of those things in which I will appear unto you, delivering you from the people and from the Gentiles, unto whom now I send you. So this son of Judah, the Messiah, the son of David, sends a Benjaminite, a son of Benjamin, right? These are cousins, right? Jesus and Paul are cousins, right? Because Jesus is the son of Judah, and Paul is the son of Benjamin. So Jesus sends his cousin Paul to the other nations. You remember Jacob was taken from Shem, separated in the call of Abraham. We just read the call of Abraham. So in Genesis chapter 11, in Genesis chapter 10, from Noah's 3 sons, 70 clans were introduced to us. 70 nations. And that's in Genesis chapter 10. Turn the page. Genesis chapter 11, these 70 nations get together and they say, we're going to build a tower. God comes down with his counsel and he scatters them and confounds their languages and casts them from his presence. And the sons of God get dominion over them, and borders are set for them. And we see, Satan saying to Jesus, I have dominion over all the kingdoms of the earth have been given to my dominion. To my dominion. It says that in Luke chapter 4, the temptations of Christ. Right? All the kingdoms of the earth have been given to my dominion. Right? And the devil said unto him, all this power. And the devil, taking him up on a high mountain, showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And the devil said unto him, all this power I will give you, and the glory of them, for that is delivered unto me. These kingdoms delivered unto me. And to whomsoever I will, I give it. Who are these kingdoms? Well, we're going to find out that these kingdoms go back to the sons, the people who are mentioned in Genesis chapter 10. The Romans, the Greeks, the Persians, the Mesopotamians. I'll show you who were the founder of these civilizations and who were the great people from these tribes and these clans, these families. The same way that David was from the clan of Judah, and he became a great famous king. And his son, Jesus, became the savior of the world, the seed in whom all the families of the earth would be blessed. Which families? Though the other families, right? So this is kind of the kingdom of Satan. So that when they're cast out of the Tower of Babel, they're given into the hand of the sons of God who rule them. But Jacob, this is chapter 10, the 70 nations are presented. Chapter 11, they're cast out of the Tower of Babel. Chapter 12, well, starting in chapter 11, we just read verse 8, we start to get the line of Abraham. We remember we just read it together, Terah was the father of Abraham. So in chapter 11, we are told they're cast out, but in verse 10, we start to get, these are the generations of Shem. Oh, why? Well, we start to read it, it leads us to one of the sons of Shem, Abraham. And then suddenly in chapter 12, God separates Abraham from these other people. He's elected. And then it says that in him, all the families of the earth will be blessed. And later we're told that, again, his seed will be a blessing, singular. So this is the plan, that somehow in the seed of Abraham, the families will be blessed. But the covenant that's made with Abraham is passed down to Isaac, not to Ishmael, his other son, that he has with Hagar. Hagar was an Egyptian, right? Hagar was the daughter of Mizraim, who was the daughter of Ham, right? Abraham married into the Hams when he married Hagar. But Sarah, his half-sister, was Shem, right? So Abraham, the covenant passes from Abraham to Isaac, yes. And from Isaac, Isaac, it passes not to Esau, whom God hated, but Jacob, whom he loved. Right? The son of the younger son. They're twins. They come up fighting. Right? The twin sons of Jacob. And the twin sons of Isaac, Jacob and Esau. Esau, what's another name for Esau? Edom. The Edomites. What's the modern country of Edom? The people who live today and are called the Edomites, the Jordanians. They live right next to Israel. They're cousins with Israel, because Israel is the sons of Jacob, and the Jordanians are the sons of Jacob's brother, Esau or Edom. So Jacob, the covenant passes from Abraham to Isaac, from Isaac to Jacob. Which covenant? The covenant that has several stipulations, including this seed, this covenant, the seed in whom the families of the earth will be blessed. That seed, that covenant of that seed, the promise of that blessing that would apply to all the families of the earth, goes from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob. From Jacob, we start to see that it will find itself in Judah, the fourth son, like we just read. From Judah, we are told it will be in the family of Jesse. Jesse has 7 sons. Samuel is told to go and anoint the one that God is going to make king. Is it the firstborn? No, second. Goes down. Finally, do you have any other sons? Well, I got this little one. He's really a kid. Well, bring him over. God says to Samuel, that's the one. Because God sees not as man sees, we are told. And he is the one anointed to be the king, David. He then slays Goliath, and that begins his fame, a Nephilim, a descendant of the sons of God and daughters of Adam. David eventually, after 10 years after Samuel anoints him, David becomes king. And the lines of David's lineage lead to Mary and Joseph, to whom the Messiah, the son of David, is born. Right? So the Abraham is separated from the other sons of Shem and Japheth, and Abraham was from the line of which one? Shem, Japheth, or Ham? I'm asking.
Ask the question again.
Whose line was Abraham from? Noah had 3 sons, Shem. So Abraham was from Shem. That's why we talk about Semitic or anti-Semitic, right? So the blessing, so finally the time has come, and that's why Messiah, the son of Judah, tells his cousin Paul, from the tribe of Benjamin, it's time, Paul. I want you to be the one that crosses the world from this covenanted people, separated all these centuries, hedged, given a land, given a temple, given the presence of God, given the writings. You, cousin Paul, you are going to cross into the larger world and reclaim in my name the nations that were cast out at the Tower of Babel. bring them back into connection and fellowship with me. And so he goes out to fulfill these promise, and all the families of the earth will be blessed in you, Abraham. He brings that blessing. And so Paul himself says, how can anyone know this and have faith unless they hear about it? And how can they hear about it unless it's preached? So faith comes by hearing the word of God, Paul explains. Why? Because he's standing in Rome, surrounded by all these gods and culture, and he's out there going, ah! Right? It's the beginnings of the whole thing. It's not as famous and known as it is now, right? If you went downtown Rome and you say, hey, have you heard of this Jewish guy, Shaul of Tarshish? Call him Paul. You'd be like, no, never heard of him, right? It was not like today when you say, have you heard of Paul? And you go, yeah, it's the Christian guy. Yeah, I know Paul, yeah. Yeah, that Paul, right? But so this is the beginnings of it. But this is what's going on, right? These guys will now form the nations of the world, and we're gonna have some very important things that will be said about them. There'll be prophecies like the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. There'll be the worship of the gods and the relationship they have with the fallen angels. There'll be the knowledge that's passed from them that creates the world, including the seats of power. There'll be the one tribe that God separates and for his own purposes. And then there'll be the blessing, the return to the fellowship where the nations are called back. And so it's important to know that the foundations of history are as the Bible says they are, because the rest of the story speaks to these foundations. When the Messiah says to Paul, go to the larger world, he's saying, go to the other children of Shem, Ham, and Japhet, and tell them that I'm calling them back to myself. The 10 tribes in the north were also cast out from the presence of God. And there are 10 tribes in the north, the 2 tribes in the south. You guys know about the civil war? After Solomon becomes king. Okay, Solomon becomes the king, and then his son becomes king. And the young people come to him, his friends, his buddies, and they say, you know what? You got to prove that you're the boss around here. You got to right away prove that you're the boss now. So I think what you should do is raise the taxes. And then the elders, the counselors of Solomon, they come to him out of that, and they say to him, no, that would be a big mistake. Don't do that. But he decides that he's going to listen to his younger buddies. And he raises the taxes and unleashes a civil war. 10 of the tribes just turn against him and walk away and form a new capital in the north of Israel. And it will eventually become Samaria. You can Google and see what's left archaeologically of that capital. Samaria in the north. And they'll rally around Ephraim, one of the sons of Joseph, as their leader. There'll be several capitals, like you can see Tel Dan in north of Israel. And this is a fierce civil war. Eventually, the north is conquered by the Syrians, and God forsakes them. In the book of Hosea, God rejects them. God just says, you're no longer my people. And he throws them out for a while. And that's interesting because Peter, who writes to these 10 tribes in the Mediterranean, I guess they still know who they are. He says that, those who were not God's people are now called God's people. He calls them back to himself. And he literally is using exactly in his letters the same words we read in Hosea. He uses the same exact words. And he reverses them. So it's like Scripture's command is reversed. The Messiah has begun the process of reconciling everything back to God. Right, starting with the 10 tribes that were rejected to the larger nations that were rejected Babylon. And that's what he's sending Paul to do when he gives him the command, and now I send you to the Gentiles. Right, so this is like a single story. So we'll go deeper into, I was going to do this time with you, but I guess it didn't happen. The same way that I pulled up these cities that Nimrod had founded, I'm going to now pull out some of the names from Genesis chapter 10, like Japhet has these sons. Well, what countries, what empires, what civilizations do we know that bear the name of these sons? There are cities and entire empires and entire civilizations named after the sons and grandsons of Noah. To this day, they carry the names that the Bible ascribes to Noah and his children, to Noah's children and grandchildren. For instance, a really good example is Mizraim, because Ham has Mizraim. That's his best, top of the line son, Mizraim. And Mizraim is the name of the country Egypt. You don't understand it in English because Egypt sounds so different, but in the Arab world, it's called Mesr, and the Persians also call it Mesr. And anywhere in your Bible it says Mizraim, it's translated for you into English as Egypt, because everyone has always known that was the name of that country. All the translators of the Bible knew that as well. It's just a very common knowledge, actually. So Mizraim, the son of Ham, is the founder of Egypt. Right? But the founder of Greece, Javan, that's the son of Japhet. Well, that's why every time you read in the Bible, Javan is translated as Greece into English for you. Madai, another son of Japhet, they created the Medo-Persian Empire. The capital is Ecbatana. Right? So there are all these kind of names that pop out right away, and some that you have to investigate a little bit. But now you understand who are these nations. So we know that Israel was the son of Shem, fine, but how about the other guys, the other nations? And then there are prophecies spoken about these nations and about the gods that are over them. And there are prophecies spoken about Jacob, and there are prophecies spoken about the covenanted people that are grafted into Jacob through the Messiah, the Gentiles that come into faith, and they have the faith of Abraham, they're circumcised of heart, and they become the sons of Abraham through faith. That's the Gentiles that believe in the Messiah. Right? The covenant is never made of the Gentiles. The covenant is always made of the house of Judah and the house of Israel. The Gentiles are grafted into it through faith. Right? But this story continues never to be anything more than the story of these 17 nations and of their God. No matter how far forward you go in history or how far you go forward into the Bible, it never ceases to be anything other than the story of Noah's children. And that's important to know, because that's why Satan has attacked it so vehemently, to destroy our heritage and our history, because it casts doubt on the future spiritual stuff that comes. That's important, like the Messiah died and all that stuff. Well, who, the son of Shem, died for the other children of Noah? Why? Right? Well, because it was all real. Because this is a real story, right? So anyways, I'll point out these empires to you in the prophecies and stuff. But this is, today we did Genesis chapter 10, 11, and 12. And we did Acts chapter 26, where the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Judah, enlists his cousin's help, Paul, the son of Benjamin, to go and tell the other sons of Noah that they can enter back into fellowship with the living God. And the Tower of Babel episode is now all gone. It's all good now. It's all good. Everyone's happy now, right? So we'll keep digging. Anyways, have a beautiful week, and we hope to see you next week. Bye.